All right, today we're taking a journey into the frozen north, but not just on a map. We're going into the frozen north of the human mind. We're going to be unmasking the Wendigo, a seriously terrifying creature from folklore that, well, it might just reveal a much darker and way more human truth about ourselves. I mean, think about that for a second. It's a pretty chilling thought, right? We always picture monsters as these things out there in the shadows hunting us. But what if the most horrific transformations don't happen on the outside, but deep inside the mind, when it's just pushed way, way past its breaking point? So first things first, let's start with the story most of us probably think we know. The myth of the Wendigo. It's a huge part of North American folklore, the kind of tale you whisper around a campfire to warn people about a very specific kind of evil. Okay, so at the very heart of this myth is a hunger that is just bottomless. It's this all-consuming greed, a starvation so deep it can literally never be satisfied. The more the Wendigo eats, the hungrier and more empty it gets. And we're not just talking about physical hunger here. This is a spiritual, psychological black hole. And you can't separate this creature from its home, the biting cold, the deep snow, and the absolute isolation of the northern wilderness. They say its heart is actually made of ice, which is, a perfect metaphor for the kind of emotional emptiness that's driving it. And here it is. This is the most terrifying part of the whole legend. A Wendigo isn't born, it's made. The stories say that it was once a human being, a person who, facing starvation, did the one thing you should never do. In that desperation, they just lost their humanity and became the very monster they were afraid of. Okay, but now, we're going to pull back the curtain on all that folklore. What if this monster isn't some supernatural spirit running around in the woods? What if it's something chillingly real? A manifestation of the human mind completely breaking under pressure that is just unbearable. So here you can really see the two sides of the coin. On one hand, you have the myth, this gaunt, supernatural beast. But then, on the other hand, you have this terrifyingly plausible reality. A human mind completely shattered by being alone and starving, basically creating its own monster from the inside out. And this isn't just some fringe theory. It's a concept known as Wendigo psychosis. It describes a total mental collapse where that intense psychological pressure to survive just gets twisted and warped. Human desperation sours and becomes this monstrous, insatiable hunger, both for real and, metaphorically. The key here is that the monster isn't coming for you from the outside. It's the final stage of a broken mind. So how does this actually happen? How does a person spiral down into a state like this? Well, it's not like flipping a switch. It's a descent, a step-by-step breakdown of everything that makes you, you. You can really see the descent happening in stages. It all kicks off with extreme isolation, which cuts a person off from any kind of support. Then that creates this intense psychological pressure, which is just made 1,000 times worse by the primal fear of starvation. From there, you get the desperation where the need to just consume and survive starts to override every single taboo. And finally, the mind just can't take it anymore. It snaps. And that's the monstrous break from reality. Let's look a little closer at these triggers, because they're crucial. First, you have the crushing weight of being completely alone. That can warp your sense of reality all by itself. Then you add the primal, gnawing fear of starvation, probably one of the most powerful motivators for any living thing. Under all that combined pressure, the social and moral rules that kind of hold our humanity together, they start to crack, and then they just shatter completely. The mind basically rewrites its own rulebook just to survive. So this brings us to what is, for me, the most unsettling part of this whole thing, the Wendigo. It isn't just some old story or a weird regional psychosis. It's a dark mirror held up to all of us. At its core, the Wendigo is what's called a visceral embodiment. That means something you feel in your gut, of humanity's darkest internal descent. It's the story of what can happen when all the guardrails of society and sanity are just stripped away, and all that's left is this raw, desperate need to consume. So really, the ultimate thing to take away here is this. The Wendigo is so much more than a myth, and it's more than a diagnosis. It's a powerful symbol. It represents this potential for darkness that lies dormant inside every one of us, a monster that's just waiting to be unmasked, not by some curse, but by the right mix of extreme, awful conditions.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty haunting question to chew on. We've explored how desperation and isolation can unmask a monster within, but it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, where is that line for any of us? What is the actual breaking point of the human mind?